we're good guys, and we look at AI as sort of a solution for good things and maybe improving life and improving operations and businesses and so on, and adding value. But bad guys, they use AI too. So a lot of the cyber attacks, a lot of the sort of methods we're actually getting in, and you're moving laterally and taking out services or putting in ransomware or even worse things.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Digital Shift. I'm very excited to have a special guest here named Anders. I have been following his EcoSec Works and his innovative way that they're approaching sustainable cybersecurity and AI efficiency. It is very impressive stuff, and we're going to talk about it today. I saw on your website that you're tackling the environmental footprint of digital infrastructure. That intersection of sustainability and security is something that a lot of people overlook, and I cannot wait to dig into that. But before we dive in, Anders, would you mind letting us know where you're joining in from today?
Well, good morning. I am in Menlo Park in Northern California, just south of San Francisco, and I've been here since many years now. Originally from Sweden, you still hear the remnants of a funky accent. I sound like that old tennis player Bjorn Borg a bit, but I've been here for several decades now, so that's who I am.
Bjorn Borg really launched tennis into its stardom that became popular today, right?
That's correct. And I used to play tennis too. In fact, all the parents in Sweden, when I grew up, forced their kids to play tennis, so that's still with me.
Yes, his legendary headband is what everybody remembers for sure.
Absolutely.
That and the long hair.
You bet.
Well, for all of the new people joining today, this is a podcast where we focus on literally the digital shift of technology. Technology is evolving at a massively fast rate, and we bring on owners, founders, and C-suite executives that tell us all about the future, so that way these become value-packed. And our goal is to just have a natural conversation about all of those journeys and insights without any fancy editing, so that way you get the real experience. So for those of you that haven't listened to our podcast before, we're going to go into Anders' background at EcoSec Works and how that came to life. And then we're going to move on to industry trends, such as how AI and sustainability are shaping the next era of cybersecurity. From there, we'll explore what's working well for the company, as well as where the friction is. And then we're going to look into the future over the next 6 to 12 months to see what is in store for technology and cybersecurity. This conversation usually runs about 30 to 40 minutes, and we're just going to have some fun from there. So again, thank you all for joining the Digital Shift. And now we're going to turn over to Anders. So Anders, can you share a little bit about your role at EcoSec Works and what inspired you to start the company?
So I'm the chief product officer. I'm one of the co-founders together with another person. His name is Tom Caldwell. He's the CEO, acting CEO. We actually worked along each other at Cisco Systems for about 11 years. He was the director of engineering. I was the director of product management there. And yeah, it's been quite a long journey for both of us. I worked by now, I think I've made a count about 30 years in tech here in the US, but also been, working with customers and vendors and engineering teams across the globe in various capacities. It's all been really about user experiences, user needs. Early on, built actually the first iPhone once, but then spent the gist of my product management years and sort of tech years in networking and network security at Cisco and other companies. My background and our background in, I would say, renewables, and things like solar, wind, EV charging, digitized grids, smart grids, etc., goes back as far as 2008. That's where things took off the first time, and at Cisco, and then spent many years in that with European companies, including in Finland. In sort of the early, Europe was ahead of the US at that time, way ahead in terms of using renewables, moving into sort of green technologies and what we now call clean tech, M2M, and then IoT. But I've also spent several years very deep in cybersecurity, and so has Tom too. He has actually three startups in cybersecurity that are all sort of executed in some way. One I've actually gone acquired back into Cisco even. We met after many years being apart, having had sort of somewhat similar tracks professionally and experience-wise in technology, and looked at, okay, what could we do now? And based on our common experience, we sort of looked at the space of EV charging and the tremendous growth of purchases and the sort of deployment of electrical vehicles out there across the globe. Again, Europe is ahead. Asia is moving very quickly. US is slightly behind Europe, but it's a tremendous growth forecasted. And with that comes the infrastructure needed to actually charge these things, not just at home, but at public charging hubs out there along the big commute corridors, public places like shopping centers, libraries, whatnot, really. And that's growing up. The groups that are doing that, they have a name. They're called charge point operators, CPOs for short. And so far, this is not a very, I would say, uncomplicated endeavor to go into for them, because the tools to actually monitor and manage these EV charging infrastructures, which comprises of chargers themselves, but also more often than not, backup power, batteries, and solar, and so on. And these actually charging hubs they actually are microgrids. So they're connected into the electrical grids. And you need to balance the sort of the consumption of power, what is actually feeding what, and so on, based on sort of the utility pricing, which changes by the hour, as we know. So it's a very sort of need for advanced capabilities. The monitoring systems they have and management systems they have does not give them enough adequate insight into what's actually taking place, if something is not working, if something is broken. And traditionally, so far, you have like an average downtime of chargers out there, of the services themselves at these hubs, between as much as 8 to 30%. It can actually be that bad. And if you are an EV driver today and you go on a road trip, for example, then you schedule to charge your vehicle as quick as possible at some point, charge hub, which you actually picked out already before. Too often people end up coming up to charging stations where they're actually not working. And if they work, they might actually run into all kinds of other problems that is caused by communication issues, failed credit card transaction, etc. So people are actually pretty unhappy with that kind of scenario today. So far, we set out to actually try to help to fix the problem by building a much more efficient way of actually understanding what's the health of the charging stations and actually the service itself for the charge point operator, and providing them with sort of a natural language solution for it, which they actually don't have today. The other big piece in this, which you already talked to and mentioned here, is the lack of cybersecurity. It's almost absolutely absent in these kind of charging scenarios and these kind of infrastructures so far. And that's kind of a bit surprising, maybe. But the type of cybersecurity companies and teams that I worked with them for example, at Illumio, we didn't even bother thinking about EV charging infrastructures. That wasn't even the 10th of top of mind or anything like this. That was sort of not even talked about. So no, there are no really good fitting solutions for managing security for charge point operators. Really not at all. And also the know-how and the cybersecurity knowledge they really don't have. These people are small teams dealing with anything that they have to deal with, which includes hardware, charging stations, solar backup, the whole thing, and actually the billing systems and all that kind of stuff too. And they do not really have any cyber training. So one cannot present complex tools to them. We aim to use AI, both genetic AI, Gen AI, and agentic AI, LLM, RAG, and also LAM, to actually provide a very automated way to manage both operations more efficiently and also the cyber piece as well.
And so you kind of hinted at it. You have found a clear gap in the market that you are solving. And so my question is, when you came to founding that company, right, for EcoSec Works, was there a specific moment in all of that realization that was like, this is why we need to start this company?
Yeah, Tom was actually the one that raised sort of the topic first, and I took some time to go out and sort of research the lay of the land, because I've spent so many years now with cybersecurity pure for customers like banks and insurance firms and the Air Force and whatnot, large environments like that. So I really did my own sort of homework, seeing is it really true that this is actually such a imminent issue, the lack of cybersecurity and the need for automation and downtimes and all these kind of things. And I realized, yes, it is. And Tom was spot on in his initial thinking and assumptions around the gap and the needs to do something here. And we talked about it early on. And what came to mind was this is not our first experience with sort of machine learning or AI or anything like that. Done that in the cybersecurity space as well. But here, sort of suddenly emerged, we thought and felt an opportunity to actually go further and using AI to really automate operations and help these operators that are, I would constitute and say, they're poor humans sitting there trying to deal with a very messy situation with too many tools, the lack of decent information, and things just happening all the time, and having a hard time sifting through what's actually is the real issue. If something is not working, what's the root cause versus just like noise. Um, so yeah, we really came to the conclusion that here is actually an opportunity to maybe move even more aggressively into using AI for a back-end issue, not just language translation and Google searches and these kind of things and ChatGPT-ish things and stuff like this, which is very consumerish or front-endish, right? I use that too, but this is solving using AI to solve a whole different level of problem, which has to do with the infrastructure itself, and automate that for humans so they can have an easier day to actually be more successful.
So, from your perspective, what are the biggest shifts that you're seeing right now in cybersecurity, especially around AI and energy efficiency?
Um, Well, there is actually a lack of security, cybersecurity, protection, defense, and energy efficiency, period. And this has been a concern that has been discussed for many years now, but really very little has been done. There's been some attacks historically in Ukraine and other places where power outages has been proven to be caused by cyber attacks and so on. So it's certainly possible to do quite a bit of damage. You can even go as far as it's absolutely possible to create fires and actually even explosions in grids if you actually manipulate power flow and stuff like this, if you're in and control some of these devices. So it is sort of a level of danger that is, sitting around the corner if we don't do things, which is at a different level than, for example, just, attacking a service provider or maybe a bank or something like this, or an airline and maybe causing the business application not to work. This can be actually maybe even a matter of life and death if it really gets that far. So there is a need and an increasing awareness now popping up in the industry around renewables and EV charging included, that something needs to be put in place. Another thing that is taking place, which actually makes this even more sort of nasty, if you like, is that we're not the only people using AI. We're good guys, and we look at AI as sort of a solution for good things and maybe improving life and improving operations and businesses and so on, and adding value. But bad guys, they use AI too. So a lot of the cyber attacks, a lot of the sort of methods for actually getting in and you're moving laterally and taking out services or putting in ransomware or even worse things, we're going to see increasingly being used through AI. So we're not fighting humans anymore attacking. We're going to be fighting AI bots, doing these sort of evil things and being the attackers. So it's almost in a way a futuristic, and it sounds a bit silly. I don't remember. I don't know if you remember RoboCop and these kind of old Arnold Schwarzenegger movies where you
It's a
end up
classic.
having sort of the non-authentic kind of robotic humans fighting each other instead of the real humans, and this starts to be okay. So we're building AI agents to fight cyber attacks from AI agents, and that's sort of an interesting little mind-blowing thought. But that's actually where it seems to be going. It's early on, and I think the industry kind of is grappling with it still. But I think that's kind of where it's going, quite frankly.
And when you talk about AI-driven tools, obviously there's the good guys and bad guys. Again, RoboCop is a classic when it comes to that type of movie. But what are the new vulnerabilities and opportunities that are emerging that leaders should be paying attention to because of these AI tools coming so mainstream?
So one of the things that I have at top of mind, because I experienced it in working with customers at companies like Illumio, is sort of the frequency and the speed of how developers and applications, sort of business teams, needs to deploy new value-add services, new business applications more efficiently. They use different resources now in hybrid ways that they didn't really do before. They change them more frequently. We've had to start to deal with scenarios where services and applications that were mostly built residing in a data center, actually the customer's data center, in their own on-prem location, so to speak, parts of that or all of it has been sort of combined with using public cloud services, and more often more than one public cloud provider than one. So you end up pretty quickly with scenarios with workloads operating from a data center. Maybe it's your main user database usually would be sitting there still, but other services for authentication and sort of all of that resources may run, some of it in Azure, some in Amazon, AWS, I mean, plus maybe even Google Cloud. And then they keep changing these, based on pricing, based on their preferences. They tweak them, they change them, they expand the services, they build that out. Each of these kind of steps, and it happens for pretty quickly, have implications for security. Like you open up communication between these different new resources. Did you check what actually needs to talk to what, and are you aware of what kind of attack vectors you just created that way? So we talk about the attack surface, and that's a major challenge for these customers development teams to sort of stay in sync with their SecOps teams on. When you look at something which are renewables and this kind of infrastructure, like in EV charging, deploying new sort of charging hubs with all the components involved, they're all interconnected. There is actually a local network. People don't really have top of mind at that stage to actually, is it secure? Is it actually open to things? Does anything here talk to the internet? Can I get in to do something to it? That's sort of, at best an afterthought. And meanwhile, if you ever get there, you have been sort of open to attacks almost fully for a long time. And that's something we said, the sort of the security awareness, the risk assessment, what you actually need to have open in terms of sort of the network piece or not, that should be part of your initial deployment, not as something you actually discovered in a bad way afterwards.
So how do you see regulation or like ESG pressures shaping this in the next few years?
Well, there is a bunch of, I would say, standards and frameworks and guidelines and even compliance pieces in space and in place since sort of a long time. NIST being one of them, but there's a long list of that. That should all apply. I don't think it's going away. It's becoming more sort of everyday meals that people need to deal with, so to speak, and actually include in their plans and everything like this. And there's like, the classic sort of category of cloud posture management solutions for security out there that does precisely that. But I think it needs to be combined with the other management tools. See, one of the challenges in the industry too, as I would say, networks grow more complex, resources are more complex, more dynamic, changing to frequencies going up. Number of tools are coming out still that are very specialized for dealing with a certain aspect of what you need to do in your environment. And they're often totally separate in the security space from the configuration or infrastructure management space. So you end up very quickly as an operations team with a plethora of tools you need to sort of try to use and figure out how to actually work, come together in a workflow. That's very hard. We call it siloed systems. And they don't look the same. They don't tell the same story. And if you have an issue, you very often have a hard time finding out exactly where's the starting point of that problem. Why is this not working? Is it a communications issue? If it is, what kind of communications issue? Is it a building piece that is broken? Is it a hardware issue out there? Are we monitoring that at all? No, we're not. We actually just have to go out and drive and look at it manually. Or is it a problem with sort of, really anything else that can go wrong in that environment? And it's sort of just, even if you would have tools that sort of gives you a way to manage all of it, very often there are too many, but they're not integrated at all.
So let's take that information and focus it on the current state at EcoSec Works. So when you look at the company itself, what's been working really well lately? Are there any wins that you're particularly proud of?
So we have taken our time from initial sort of ideation, if you like, which I described before when Tom and I sort of rejoined again after so many years having separate paths. And we've taken our time to sort of, I would say, initially validate even the assumptions and ideas themselves. And luckily we had good contacts with existing charge point operators since our previous life, especially Tom had, because he's worked in EV charging infrastructure management space, not in the same way we do this at all. But we had already people that we could sort of pick up the phone and call and talk to, and then ask, like, is this actually, are we thinking right about this, or do you have these issues? Do you have these issues in this way that we're sort of thinking about it, and so on. So we actually and we learned a lot from that, those kind of conversations. So after that, we set out to sort of start to build prototypes and take initial concepts. And we're both kind of guys that roll up our sleeves and code and stuff like this still in our old age. So we built some things, and we sort of were close to an MVP, using AI very, very, very heavily in the back. That's really where our sort of proprietary sort of IP stuff sits. And we have about, I would say, at this stage, a good 20 or so customers that we know intimately well, both in the US and in Europe, that are very interested in deploying this once it sort of becomes ready. We have a couple of MOUs in place, even with players here in the US that are wanting to do this, as soon as possible. So we're at that stage really where we're about to go live, we believe. So looking very good, tremendous interest. Yes, is there a curveball taking the current situation with sort of the views of this administration in this country about climate change and not going for renewables and sort of questioning all that kind of stuff? But I think actually the cat is out of the bag. I read some numbers a couple of days ago that renewables as combined is now actually generating more power than coal for the first time ever globally. So it is here, and it's here to stay and grow too. And people in Europe especially are buying EVs like you wouldn't know. So the sales rate is pointing up. So yeah, we're
So
currently talking to investors. As a trick of sort of orchestrating that in the right way. So you have sort of the early people, then you have line up the second sort of line of investors, the third, and so on. So you need to be careful about that. But that's kind of where we are.
I mean, that sounds really promising. And you mentioned, when it's ready. So is there a lead time or something that your customers are waiting on?
Um, when we do this, when we pull the trigger and actually building from, I would say we're close to first MVP, very, very close, just a few weeks. Then we just need, I would say, about a month, and we'll sort of trigger this off. So it's imminent actually.
Okay. And so then on the flip side, what has been the most frustrating or just slowing down your progress to get to this goal of yours?
I would say, well, it's a couple of things. I would say the main two things has been, and this is not my first experience with sort of this type of phenomenon, but uh, each time I have moved into or been part of teams that I moved into, if you call the new sort of vertical, the new domain in technology, where you try to apply maybe some existing, technologies, let's say take in this case cybersecurity, but we move it into EV charging. Okay, that's never really been done before in a serious way, other than just marketing bluff. Um, and each time you do things like that, although people sort of intellectually totally agree with it, and maybe they're super excited too about this and totally see the whole point with it and the future in it. Oh, this is going to be big and all these kind of things. I sort of get it logically, but the fact that it's a new sort of new domain, or a new combination domain, if you like, makes people sort of a bit hesitant to actually move on. It takes more explanation for what we're actually going to do and why this is good when you come into a new place like this, a new path, a new stepping stone and sort of tech, than if you're dealing with something that is already established and well understood and sort of just trusted. So that's one aspect. I think that's a very, very generic one. I met that before when I moved, worked with Smart Grid initially and so on too. The other piece for us specifically in these times have, of course, been that we have an administration which is basically calling climate change and the need for renewables the biggest hoax ever. It doesn't really help. That also makes the market uncertain. If I'm an investor today, I probably hold on to my money and sit and wait and see what's going to happen a bit. So that's another piece that has sort of slowed things down a bit. But that doesn't mean it's frozen or gone or stopped. I think it's just throwing in a curveball a bit.
So when it comes to the people, right, the people of Earth, not being ready for it, what type of approaches do you do to get them educated in a way that makes them safe, making that jump, even though it's a better thing?
Well, one just needs to spend a bit more time on explaining the use cases. If you can, bringing up a real example from a real person. I've actually done done this. I've had even an old manager that I used to have back at a company called Infogear, which was acquired by Cisco. We happen to be close to neighbors here in Menlo Park these days. His name is Dennis Tsu. He has kids and grandchildren these days up in Seattle, Vancouver. He likes to drive with his wife up there, visit them, and do all kinds of things and help out. And he's retired now, so he has a good life. But he's a big EV guy. He uses, like, he had a Tesla, he changed that to BMW or whatever. But he uses these things and he drives and drives and drives. And he's been really living these scenarios where he arrives at the charging hub somewhere along I-5, the Interstate 5 here. There's a big road up there. It's going to go along the whole sort of Pacific Northwest. And he's booked a time with an EV charging station, and it's all set and it's all figured out the mileage he's going to get. And he comes there and nothing is working. And then he needs to check into a hotel with his wife and stay one night longer, simply because he's now using an EV. While before he could drive that distance in one full day. I've actually done things where I take Dennis on a call and explain to people what actually took place. And here's a real person that is living this problem today. And so that helps. It's making things as tangible as possible and not just talk about things in sort of theoretical ways. That's one thing one can do.
So let's look out into the future now. If you look in the next 6 to 12 months when it comes to cybersecurity, especially around electrical anything, what do you see coming that's going to change the way people approach?
Well, at some point, I think taking the increasing cells all still going on and ramping up, especially in Europe and in Asia, actually here too in the US, despite the president administration views, at some point in that stage here, this is going to get to I think a breaking point where having downtimes between anything like 8 to 10 to 30% of non-working charging stations and infrastructure out there, plus that they're not even secured almost at all. I think we're gonna get to a point where people are just going, this is not functioning anymore. It needs to be fixed pretty much as fast as possible overnight, please. And I don't think we're just there just yet at that breaking point, but it's getting close. I have described this to Tom as this is like one of those big waves you see in the Pacific. You got the surfers sitting there waiting for the big wave to come. You don't know when it's going to come, really, but you better be out there sitting and waiting, because if you're on the beach and seeing that big wave finally coming, you're not going to get out there in time to actually, take it and have a good ride. So it's a bit of a, I would say that wait and see mode just before the big wave hits. So,
What about for AI?
well, so I'm a believer in AI, but I'm a believer in AI as it can actually be used in various ways for, uh, I would say, what I call back-end system issues and purposes to actually make things more efficient, safe, automated, remove the human sort of created errors. But it's going to take some trust from operations people to sort of, and securities people especially, to have that confidence in it. But again, I mean, in 2006, when if you talk to service providers that we would run our services for them at Cisco in the cloud, they would basically scream at you and say, "No way, I'm going to even deal with you. Then go away." And these days we know where we are. Everybody's doing this, so it's sort of that confidence actually took them somewhere else over time. So I think it's going to be the confidence in AI is going to get there. Now I also think there is a lot currently right now around AI, which is actually very much like the internet bubble once was. A lot of things where people are just saying AI or putting something, they're using AI for something, and suddenly that becomes a hugely investable sort of project, and for no good reasons at all, because it doesn't even have a business model yet. So I think we're going to see a bit of a blow up that way. That's my personal guess. But I think it's here to stay for the back end issues for sure.
So now let's transition looking forward from a trend perspective in industry to your own company. So when you look at EcoSec Works over the next 6 to 12 months from now, what is your next big milestone that you're trying to hit?
Well, starting those real projects with real customers, especially those two that we have MOUs with, and get that going and get the proof in the pudding, having some investors coming in, but frankly, just moving on even sort of organically. We're not just doing this at this stage for us. We have experiences, and we're sort of experienced people. We like to build a company which is good for others to sort of get some education and learning too. So having staffers join us, maybe younger resources, younger people, to get into a new sort of technology combination area, which is really exciting. Sort of deal with this. Yeah, that's kind of what we're looking forward to do. I think that's the mindset, and then hopefully it takes off nicely.
Is there a key metric or signal that you're going to be looking for to knowing you're on track?
Um, well, we're a number of people. We are looking at number of chargers, um, the build out of these, kind of where they sit. So it's interesting. I think that market is also a bit like uncharted, so to speak. You see a lot of existing charging services in some public places and things like this, and then across these hubs and so on, and Wi-Fi, whatnot, as I mentioned. But also there's clearly a new track where building companies are now building in charging stations as part of their new building project. Period. And it's just part of the blueprint they have to operate with, and they know they maybe have to, but they're also figuring out and building out the business around that kind of stuff. So you build it in, you build a brand new building, new construction projects, and you put in parking in there, and then EV charges goes in, and then you actually have a business tied to it as well. You may actually partner with somebody to do that too. But that's another big sort of way of getting to market. So we're kind of looking at numbers. I mean, in one way, you need to make revenue, and you're actually going to go forward and build that up. But you also need to sort of uh, test the water and see where is the sort of the bigger drives going to take place. How does this actually get to market? So,
If you had a magic wand and could instantly fix one thing in your business that you would say is holding you back to getting to that goal, what do you think it is?
um, early investment would be good. Having some more to actually test with and go out and sort of just build stuff and put it out and prove it.
Okay, well, great. Before we do our sign off, do you have any words of wisdom for our listeners when it comes to cybersecurity that you'd like to leave them with?
Cybersecurity is one of those domains in tech which uh, in my experience, you can only do it well if you're very careful, if you think hard, pretty intensely, and long about the problems you're trying to solve and how you would do it and what it would mean and what could actually go wrong, or still be ineffective if you do it in a certain way. It is not a domain for, driving the car with half of the attention on what you're doing. This is you either throw yourself totally into the water and then deal with it, or you should not even try it. It is a pretty it is very sort of it requires attention, it requires care, it requires curiosity. It changes all the time, so it's not like we have known something or learned something or have a certain experience and we're done. It keeps evolving all the time, so you better be interested in learning new things all the time too. So that's what I would say.
Sounds good, Anders. This has been such a valuable conversation, and I thank you for sharing your insights on how cybersecurity can actually help drive sustainability instead of just working against it. For all of our listeners, you can learn more about Anders and his company, EcoSec Works, at ecosecworks.ai. You'll be able to find those links down in the description. And if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss future interviews with leaders that are reshaping the digital landscape. Anders, again, thank you so much for your time today on The Digital Shift. This has been awesome.
Nice. Thank you for having me, and have a really good day. Thank you.
Hey there, it's Darren from The Digital Shift. I wanted to take a moment to thank you so much for listening to today's podcast. If you haven't already, make sure to check out the links in the description to learn even more information of everything we went over today. But if you enjoyed this podcast, then you are absolutely going to love this one. And if you're looking to look deeper into the technology that we go over in these videos, then go ahead and check out this one here. Regardless of which one you pick, you're going to walk away with something new. As always, I'll talk to you in the next one, and keep being awesome.